podium, I feel like I'm giving a briefing on the situation in the Gulf or something. Did I read the thing from the basketball diaries last time? I did actually. Now, all right, I'm just going to go with this maybe later. I wanted to read some pieces from this new novel I'm working on, but I really couldn't find anything that wasn't like, I couldn't just read out of context without telling the entire novel. I tried it once before and I spent like 45 minutes just ad-libbing the story of the book and about 4 minutes reading 4 pages from it, So it was okay, actually. It was taped and I came up with a lot of stuff that I made up on the way that I could use. But all right, this is called Invitation to the Dance. It kind of breaks off in different directions. It has the uptown Tony crowd and the downtown despicable crowd in the same piece. Of all the brilliant people I've met on the art scene, I suppose Edwin Denby is my candidate for the most interesting. He's rather old now and looks even older because of his hair, which is a shade of moonlight. He isn't well known to the mass college audience as a poet, but he should be. The poets themselves, however, have great regard for his work. Frank O'Hara has declared Edwin to be one of his greatest influences. However, he's considered by many to be the greatest living critic of the dance, both classical and modern, and his book, Looking at the Dance, is likely the definitive work on the subject. But what impresses me most is that he has the most generous intellect I've ever come in contact with. I never pass up a chance to listen to him at a party. I saw him the other night at one of Anne Wallman's soirees and asked him about the story concerning the time he and Willem de Kooning, the painter, were attacked by a butterfly in broad daylight on the streets of New York City. He explained that, yes, the attack had in fact taken place, that he had written about it in one of his books, actually. It seems this disoriented rogue, a butterfly, a rather large one, kept nipping at de Kooning's eyes. It was on 7th Avenue and 29th Street, right across from the building where Edwin and de Kooning were neighbors in adjacent lofts in the early days. It would have been a strange ending to de Kooning's career, I said, sort of giggling, being blinded by a vicious butterfly. Edwin took me totally seriously. It would have been a horrible tragedy. Edwin spoke solemnly in his slightly clipped European accent, which made him sound more like somebody from India studying at Oxford. It was obvious he loved de Kooning as a painter and a friend. Such a painter as he. But let me tell you something, it was not so unexplainable an occurrence. You see, there are certain species of butterflies which thrive on saline. It is to them a great delicacy as caviar to a man or honey to a bear. And where is their saline? In the eye, be it human or animal. In South America, there is a species of crocodiles known as the caiman. Perhaps you have heard of the Cayman Islands? Well, wherever there are caimans basking in the sun on the bank of a river or swamp, there are invariably hordes of butterflies flitting about the beast's eyes, attempting to suck up the salty fluid. Sometimes the caimans are so dazed by the sun that they are oblivious, and the butterflies feast. Others move back into the water where they are still pursued by their winged parasites because they must keep their eyes and snouts above the waterline. Eventually they are driven, these huge monsters which man so fears, into their sanctuary, the reeds and eelgrass growing out of the water. So you see, if these butterflies can take on a crocodile which man so fears, then why not a poor poet and a painter on 7th Avenue? I was astounded by this rap. So much so that it prevented me from asking if the little pest had escaped unharmed or if it had been swatted down and squashed underfoot by a furious Dutch abstract expressionist. I'm glad I kept my mouth shut because it gave Edwin the chance to invite me to a preview of Balanchine's new piece at Lincoln Center the following night. We set a time and place to meet, shook hands, and bid each other good night. The next evening, I entered the lobby of the New York State Theater in Lincoln Center. Its elegance made me slightly anxious. I was 10 minutes early for my meeting with Edwin, so I stepped outside onto the plaza. The air was sweet. It had that strange twilight temperature that betrays no particular season. I surveyed the complex of carefully lit buildings comprising Lincoln Center. Mussolini-style architecture like the tombs down on Center Street, I said to myself, though loudly enough for some pert co-ed tourist to hear me. She moved hurriedly away. She'd heard about people like that in New York. I studied the giant murals done by Chagall flanking each side of the Opera House's lobby. They're fine as far as they go, but I always thought that commission for those huge canvases should have been given to Hans Hofmann, whose work said so much more about the artistic energy of New York City. I mean, Chagall and his angels, they're fucking everywhere. I can't dig it anymore. I returned to the lobby and spotted Edwin's neatly combed white hair. I went up and greeted him, asking his forgiveness if I kept him waiting. He replied that he had just arrived and then complimented me on my attire. I had indeed gone out of my way to look half decent, knowing how proper Edwin is. I knew that this jaunt to the ballet was Edwin's way of instilling some culture into my street sensibilities. I also knew that he enjoyed being seen at the events with good-looking young men, though it had more to do with the energy than their sexuality. And he certainly never made any advances at me. All right. and for these reasons, I didn't want to embarrass him by showing up like some dirtbag. I was wearing my well-cut, dress-up corduroy trousers. If they cost more than $50, I refuse to call them pants. And a matching velvet jacket, double-breasted with a quasi-Edwardian cut. It was very spiffy, if I do say so myself. The jacket was a gift from my friend Bill Berkson. Throughout the 60s, Bill was a perennial choice for the fashion magazines, especially Esquire's 10 best-dressed men's list. This guy got more ass than a toilet seat. He was very good-looking, and he was rich. One night, I recall going to the fancy show business restaurant Elaine's with him, and recall Tina Louise, the starlet from the show Gilligan's Island, actually and seriously leaning across a table, sighing and singing to Bill, "I'm in the mood for love." But sometimes around 1969, he grew his hair long and started giving away his fancy duds to his poet friends. It was an amazing scene. Bill was living uptown then. Actually, I was staying at his house for free. And you had all these seedy poets arriving in his apartment in their Goodwill threads and then returning to the Lower East Side in breezy white Panama suits with the hat and all. I remember Ted Berrigan strolling barrel-chested down St. Mark's Place wearing a Rudy Gernrich Nehru jacket 3 sizes too small. It had like the sleeves up to here, you know, and Ted was walking along, you know, hey, what do you say, boss? Everything he saw in those days was minimal sculpture. You know, he'd see like a beer can in the street and go, minimal sculpture. As for me, I made out like a bandit since I was staying there, and I had my first pick the night before the giveaway, and I was the same shirt size as Bill and jacket as well. Bill's charitable gesture that day, some 2 years ago, made it possible for me to look so resplendent as Edwin and I were escorted to our box. The beam of an elderly matron's flashlight directed us to our seats. Edwin began chatting effusively with a regal-looking couple beside him. Edwin promptly turned and introduced us. It turned out to be the maestro himself, George Balanchine, and his wife, who had that singular charm that only comes from standing for years right beside genius. The infamous Mr. B was positively aristocratic. As the lights began to dim, I realized what an amazing opportunity this was. I would be within earshot of the maestro's comments, seeing the ballet through his eyes as well as Edwin's. It was fortunate that I had taken an amphetamine pill before going out. I was horribly embarrassed when I nodded off the last time I went with Edwin to a ballet, and that was a matinee for the Nutcracker, for God's sake. It would be even worse to fall asleep next to the show's choreographer. He didn't have one positive thing to say. It was all a stream of barbed invectives hurled at every dancer, his wife taking it down copiously in a notebook. From the principals on down, he had an unbelievable ability to see the piece as a whole, as well as to focus on each dancer's performance, weaknesses, strengths. When the last piece was over and he and his wife had bid us a cordial goodbye, I was exhausted by all the detail I had taken in by even daring to watch the dance through his eyes. Edwin took me backstage. I was still somewhat dazed, but I certainly perked up when Edwin introduced me to my favorite prima ballerina, Patricia McBride. She had this radiant flush from just having danced and was even more beautiful up close than she was on stage. I had an idea, a very distant idea, especially when she seemed to pass the time allotted for the perfunctory backstage greetings and actually began to converse with me. But I knew I was in over my head. Edwin gathered me off before I hyperventilated from the sight of all those tutu-clad dancers. It's true, I've always had a fetish for that gander-like walk and the way they pin up their hair in buns, revealing those long stem necks. Once we were out on Broadway, Edwin and I stopped in a place for coffee, then said goodnight, parted in different directions. I made it over to the east side to see what was happening at Max's Kansas City. I entered and headed for the back room, the Warhol room. Things were kind of quiet, though Jackie Curtis was carrying on as usual with some friends in a back booth. Jackie is underrated at everything she does. I suppose she's best known as an actress and playwright at La Mama, but she's got endless talents in other areas as well. Some people have this bias against her, thinking everything she does is based on a gimmick, simply because Jackie is actually a man in drag. I don't call that bias. I call it outright bigotry. I spent many wonderful nights with her at Max's, talking of her dreams of Scandinavia. My God, Jim, she spoke as I approached her booth. Well, aren't you all dressed up? Jackie was the Jackie from Take a Walk in the Wild Side, who shaved her hair off one time and wanted to be a man again, particularly James Dean. But this was in the previous period. My God, Jim, she spoke up as I approached the booth. Well, aren't you all dressed up? A tie and everything, and that jacket. I never realized how handsome you were. Well, you know, I answered, feigning embarrassment. I had to get all spiffed up. You see, I went to the ballet with Evan. Oh, did you enjoy it? Was it wonderful? Yeah, it was great, Jackie. Didn't it make you horny? Everyone I know says the ballet makes them feel all horny. You should have some sex tonight, Jim, really. You have to get laid after the ballet. That's an absolute must. It's a must, or at the very least, have a blowjob. That said, Jackie stood up and pushed open the rear emergency exit door that led to the back alley. She took my hand and led me into the darkness, and then leaned me against the side of a dumpster. I made no real effort to protest. For whatever reason, I don't know. Actually, her post-dance sex theory made some kind of frayed sense to me. Maybe I was just horny from the pill I'd taken earlier. At any rate, Jackie was down on her cheap stocking knees, humming the overture to the Nutcracker with her lips around my dick. My trousers were pulled down to my knees, and her hands ran up and down my thighs like disoriented mice. All I could think of, my eyes sealed tight, was Patricia McBride down there instead of Jackie. I think I even moaned out her name a few times. Patty, let me do it to you while you're on point. Jackie, meanwhile, was oblivious to my utterances. She had her skirt hiked up and was playing with her own dick while still sucking mine. I pulled away very fast, violently almost. It was a truly frightening scene. Jackie had a monstrous cock. The sight of it put a damper on all my fantasies. I thought they took some kind of pills in preparation for the upcoming operation or something, but it was humongous. I made myself as presentable as possible and returned to the rear door. Jackie followed me, asking what was wrong. As if she had to ask. Getting a blowjob from some ersatz woman with a bigger cock than your own. This is called On Gloria. Gloria Excelsior, one of Andy Warhol's superstars, has been hanging around the poetry readings at St. Mark's Church. St. Mark's is, of course, my home away from home. I guess it was Billy B., my provider of room and board, who first brought her around. One night she stayed with Jerry Malanger after the reading and, in a moment of stone blasphemy, got Jerry and me to pose naked on the altar, standing on each other's shoulders against a giant wooden cross. Gloria and I have been hanging about together, cross-lapping each other's grounds of operation since that night. That's been a month, I guess, a very full month. Gloria is a speed freak. It was in the true sense of the word. She has been on a virtual non-stop run of speed in one form or another for the last 10 years. You'd think she by now voiced it into one of those arcane, babbling exclamation points with shoes by this time. The fact is she has to be, let's not mince words, the fattest speed junkie in the history of pharmaceuticals. If she's 5'9", then she is at the very least 260 pounds, and that is a kindness on my part. On the other hand, I've lost close to 20 pounds in the last month. Gloria has talked me into undergoing her therapy to cure me of my addiction to heroin, a drug she genuinely despises without any sense of irony. This therapy of her involves constant injections of methadone in any form possible. The favored form is Tasoxin in these 15-milligram pills. The pills are actually nothing but rounded bits of plastic with a yellow dust of pure meth. One simply takes 30 or so of these little gabbers, leaving them in their little pill bottle. She gets these things from a legit drugstore, I've discovered. and fills the vial with water, leaving it to soak overnight. And you wake up the next morning to find a jaundiced liqueur, suitable for injecting. The pills just sit there on the bottom of the bottle, a bone-white color now, but in every other sense, undissolved. I can't imagine what they must do to a person's stomach if swallowed as directed. They look like tiny skulls through the yellow haze of the solution. Be that as it may, it is a potent solution indeed. I take it straight in the vein so as to get the maximum rush, which is something like inserting a model railroad locomotive into your bloodlines and having it run at open throttle directly from armpit to heart to brain, proceeding on to local stops everywhere else in the body after delivering to these prime points. The trouble is that of late I smell circuits burning somewhere in the tracks. Gloria seems to go on in stride, urging me to force herself to eat. I don't want to eat. I want to talk. I talk to everybody, and it pisses me off when they interrupt to talk back. I sometimes think of offering money to friends to buy their turn in a conversation. As we talk on the phone, and we talk on the phone constantly. That's Gloria's art form. She tapes every telephone conversation in and out of her room at the Thomas Jefferson Hotel. Andy just called, in fact. He tapes his calls, too. Gloria is out to dinner, proving that it is possible to shoot speed and ingest 14 cheeseburgers, indeed, in the same 20 minutes. But Andy just hears his voice from me and knows that I'm not high yet and gets off the line quickly, just telling me how butch I sound when I'm straight. I feel like a fucking handkerchief just back from the laundry. No one is interested in you if you're not filled with snot. Her room is like the brain of a perverse child. There are little furry things everywhere. She lies on her bed and cuddles them in a fetal position, which at her weight is a total sight, and talks and talks. The place is about 10 by 10, and she has every inch of every wall covered with some kind of art or curio. Some of the works are fantastic, and she has all the biggies, Andy and Jasper Johns, Robert Rauschenberg, they're all represented. But it's all so crammed together that it just melts into one abstraction with a feeling of vertigo, especially with this particular drug. It's like standing out on a ledge 23 flights up, alone with the attraction of the zenith. She also has a collection of vibrators that must run up half the electrical wattage in this hotel. Sex within such a confined space couldn't, by the laws of physics, be anything but bizarre, and it is. Did you ever play Lamp? That's all I'm saying. No, I played it once, and that's all I'm saying. I never played carnival with that's when someone sits on your face and you guess their weight. It's called me, I know. Meeting Andrea. I walked into the back room of Max's, Kansas City tonight, a little more loaded than I had thought I was when I left the house. I was holding my hand up to the laser beam. There was this laser beam which ran from, well, there's a whole section in the book about how it had all these false directions and stuff. You didn't know where it originated from, but it went right to Max's, and it went off a mirror and it ended at the back wall of Max's, you know. A laser beam in those days was a big deal, you know, in like 70. More loaded than I thought I was when I left the house. I was holding my hand up into the laser beam, letting the light pass through, and considering the possibility that I had perhaps missed the vein on the last shot, and thus the rush was just coming on, slowly and with a vengeance. Lost in this rumination, hands still poised in the beam, passing red through my palm and onto the white wall where it simply hung like a stigmata, Andrea comes up to me and leans into my ear. Wouldn't it be nice if we could pass through the light instead of the opposite, such as you are now experiencing? That's quite a non sequitur, I thought to myself, not thinking Andrea had it in her. She is the newest of Andy's stable of whacked-out superstars, a Jewish-American princess from Queens who had adopted the name of her mentor, that is, Andrea Warhol. I looked down at her. She was only about 4'10". Then we would have to move at the speed of light, I said, and the first rule of the law of relativity is that although one can move at 99.9% of that speed, it is impossible to equal the speed itself, since that is the point of relativity itself. I was quite pleased with myself for spitting this out with such alacrity, as ripped out of my brain as I was, and slyly peered around, hoping someone at a nearby table had picked up on the drift and was as impressed as I was with myself. Nothing happening there. They were all busy impressing someone else themselves. The real world is hard on the ego, and the back room of Max's is out of the fucking question altogether. I know a faster speed, Andrea spoke up. I had forgotten about her, although she was amazingly sexy, with a body that would fit balanced in your hand like a boxed edition of Proust. God, where did that come from? Must have been looking up at the bookshelf when I said that. What would that be, I asked. I was switching gears, forgot about being a conceited asshole. I was now trying to get over on her. The speed of death, she replied. I had a stupid smile on my face, which I lost clumsily on hearing her answer. I could feel it fall down at my feet, the smile. Huh? You know, you hear about those people who have accidents and their hearts stop beating for a time and they're pronounced clinically dead, then some hot shit doctor runs in and revives them. It's like those people always describe the very same sensation of entering like a long tunnel and passing into the purest white light and becoming almost one with that light. And just then they're brought back, but they did really pass through that light and would have become the light itself if the doctor didn't fuck things up in a way, so to speak, that is. How would you like to continue this later? Come home with me, I mean. I was realizing as I said this that I was seriously stoned, as seriously as one could get without being unconscious under a toilet seat somewhere strange. Not tonight, she went on, as if she didn't even hear what I had said, but knew I was going to say it because everybody did, sooner or later, every night of her life. Why don't you come see me tomorrow night? I live right on Park Avenue, right up the street, about 8, no, make it 5 to 8, 5 to 8 p.m. naturally. You'll see something special. I certainly will be there. I needed to sit or fall. You're Catholic, she asked. I stumbled, but I'm on hiatus. Don't kid around about such things. You're not as smart as you think. None of these fuckers are. She raised her voice, pointing around the room. That's another rule of relativity. I was impressed by that, almost as impressed as by the way she looked walking away and out the door. This is the next one. In the 2 weeks, this goes right on. In the 2 weeks I've been here, the apartment that Gloria got me for this summer has turned into one vast closet. If I let go of my tendency towards excessive neatness for a single day, things just get messier and messier. So I'm frantically overturning piles of clothing, trying to find something worthy of a subtle pose as I enter Andrea's place tonight for our coming hours of good times, lust, defiance, high jinks, sex approaching a new decade, sweetness and possibilities unparalleled among the ages. And I'm late, and holy shit, the only thing reasonably unfilthy is this semi-fucking cowboy shirt. Well, I guess I'll have to go with it. I might be in luck. She may have a fetish. When your wardrobe consists of nothing but a phony cowboy shirt and denims, you have to hope for fixations. I inject and speed out the door. It's another one of those steel blue nights on Park Avenue South, and the laser I have been obsessed with is sharp as a beacon. It's menacing looking, as if someone drilled a hole in the side of a canister of plutonium, and it spit out this seriously harmful light. I want to stick my hand in its path like I do in the back room of Max's, where its intricate journey ends, but it's 5 flights up and beyond my reach. The higher it gets, the more it obsesses me. I notice it passes right by the address which Andrea gave me, and now, looking down on pavement level for the first time since I turned onto the street, I notice something else. It's not reassuring. I stab my pockets for the vial of Valium, frayed edges, nauseum insipious. The red twirling lights of 5 police cars and an ambulance are clashing into each other and bouncing off the hoods of passing cars, carrying the whole crimson mess right up the block to me. I break into a dead run. I know without looking that the building there in front of is the address that she gave me, and I think I know something more than I want. I get there, oh God, it's her. She's dead. And she's jumped, and she's lying there naked and dead and covered with a blanket that had been leaning a few minutes before against a spare tire in some cop car. She's holding a can of Diet Cola in one hand and a pair of rosary beads in the other. Her hair is smashed on one side. Her fine blonde hair, it's like a tangled net with small shining red fish, trapped and lifeless. I stagger backward onto the hood of a car and hug the hood ornament until I'm almost twisting it off. A cop moves me away. I notice this guy, Emilio, a factory sycophant and quasi-Italian aristocrat utility man, heading towards me. I'm about to tell him to piss off, but he gets out enough words for me to bite. He asks me if I had a date with her, and I tell him I did. Then he goes on that he too was supposed to meet her at 8, and he points out 7 or 9 other Max's habitees who were hoovering around, and explains that she had made dates with all of them for the same time. I guess she wanted an audience, you know? No, I wouldn't know. Why don't you not continue at what you're saying and just tell me if anyone saw her jump? Oh, but I saw her jump, he replied, breaking his English with finesse. I always arrive early, always. It was strange, you know. You know, Europeans are not supposed to arrive early, but I make it a point when I'm in America to always arrive early. Go on, will you, man? You saw her jump? Yeah. Yes, it was like I saw her. It was like she was jumping onto the laser beam, as if she was trying to grab it, but with her mouth, not her hands, like as if she wanted to swallow it, or be swallowed by it, I mumbled, remembering her talk last night. What? Never mind. You mean she passed right through the beam as she fell? Yes, right through. And well, it was really very strange. I know I was in shock and all seeing this, but she yelled out something very strange before she jumped. I don't know what, but I was in a state very strange. You see, it seemed from down here like some illusion of optics, yes? It seemed that for a moment, like a whole second of time, that she actually defied the physics and hung onto that beam from the laser as if it were a line for clothing. And the can of soda and the rosary, why was that? She was a Jew, no? I walked away without any acknowledgement to Emilio, though I was in debt to him for what he had said. She was a Jew, and last night she asked me, her last words, I believe, if I were a Catholic. Why did she ask me to come 5 minutes before the others? I imagine she thought I was such an asshole with my absolute and overwhelming love of my own bullshit rap that she wanted to show me before the others got there something about a genuine absolute, the absolute in action. I could talk all night about relativity and the speed of light, but she was going to prove her point in complete and enduring terms about her notion, that crazed yet beautiful phrase, the speed of death. And why did she decide to jump before I or the rest of the boys, aside from the punctually at ease Emilio, had arrived? Was it charity for me, sparing me the sight? More likely it was just disregard. Why should she think of me at all in the face of her trip into the passing of light? Why did she ask me at all? A laugh? I'm laughing so hard it's becoming very difficult to breathe. I go home and stare in the big mirror. I see too much of myself there. This is in the third part of the book. In the second part, I go to California, and then I go back to New York. Then actually, when the book ended, I went back out to California for quite a while, but it's neither here nor there. Because I didn't need New York anymore as far as needing all this rush and hassle and shit. I had to find some place to walk my dog. Someplace big, you know. This is called Hello, Dali. Today, right in the glare of the sun bent by the giant facades of Midtown, I was robbed of a cab by one of the world's most famous living artists. It's true, check this out. I just finished my monthly sojourn to the art galleries along 57th Street, and I was thinking about what dogs nearly all the exhibits were. I may not know what I like, but I know art, and these shows were truly canine. The one exception which made this trip uptown worthwhile was the Alex Katz exhibit. He had these giant paintings of orange flowers. The movement of the colors made you recoil as you entered the room, as if you'd fired a very high-caliber rifle. I suppose out in the street I was walking in my usual Midtown days. It seems whenever I venture above 14th Street and beneath 96th, I am struck by some partial epilepsy. I imagine it's a defense device against the shattering medleys of wealth and beautiful women. Whenever I return home from these trips, I find huge black and blue welts on my hips from walking into parking meters. Actually, my defenses were, for the most part, failing me again today as usual. The weather was just turning mild after a harsh winter, and the uptown women were taking the opportunity to shed their long coats and display those tight, moneyed asses in silk pants or chic blue jeans. It was devastating. Men's heads were turning with that urgency usually reserved for auto accidents. I tried to avoid this crass leering. I really do, but then something walks by that simply will not stand still, so to speak, for any resistance. It's true. There is some perverse element in scoping ass of wealth and means that just does not exist with the penurious bottoms of one's own class, however fine they are. A little epiphany there. But let me get back to my run-in with the famous artist. As I've already noted, I am quite willing to admit I may have, been somewhat in the grip of my midday trance in Midtown, but how bad could it have been? After all, I was out there on 57th, between 5th and 6th, the veritable hub of Midtown, between two parked cars flagging a cab with that arm-hand motion that says, "Hey, I grew up here, so give me a fucking break." You need to have sharp wits about you to get a cab in New York. Any jerk knows that. And I did, in fact, get a cabbie's attention. There he was, pulling right up to me, wedged in tight between two double-parked delivery trucks. The situation was clear. It was my cab. Then things happened, fast and chaotic, yet smooth as the curves of the Henry Moore sculpture in the lobby of the glass building across the street. This radically visible couple, each flailing their arms and chattering speedily in French, exited the building right in front of me. They were obviously coming from some art show, because it was one of those 6-story buildings with nothing but galleries on every floor. I had my hands on the grip of the cab's door, but I couldn't take my eyes off the couple. They were both, despite the breakthrough of spring, wearing ankle-length sable coats. Those coats must have cost enough to bite a very large chunk off the deficit of last year's Soviet economy. Because of the wild French and the crazed Latin gesticulations, I had thought they were arguing furiously, but in the shudder of an eye, they were peering adoringly at each other, her furry arm linked in his. I noticed her first. That was natural enough. She was stunning. Her hair dark and savage, full lips with creamy gloss, and large brown eyes with lashes as long and sharp as daggers on a child's charm bracelet. Her coat was unbuttoned, flung open with severe purpose, revealing brown leather pants on long legs leading to Spanish boots, above a waist adorned with a huge buckle that looked like actual tortoise shell, an endangered species, which sort of pissed me off for a moment. She wore a thin cashmere sweater, its cream color matching her lipstick. God, was she fast with the moves. Within no more than 2 seconds, she had flung her hair back salaciously 3.5 times, pursed, pouted, and parted her lips 4 times, and fluttered those huge lashes uncountable times, faster than a hummingbird's wings when it speaks in the nectar. They were so thick with mascara that I actually believe that I heard over the traffic horns and engines of trucks in Midtown, them clicking like a timepiece of an overwound spring. This all occurred within a very small envelope of time, you must understand. I was still holding the taxi door by a candle, and it washed off enough dazzle from my brain to push the button there and slightly open the door. The cab driver made no complaints. He was in no big hurry. He, too, had taken intense notice of this woman with the audible eyelids. Several men around the immediate area had also noticed, and several beyond. Umbrellas were being poked into thighs. Words were exchanged. But my attention had somehow been drawn to the man beside her, and it was only an instant before the currents of recognition were ignited. Nobody douched by celebrity could be more recognizable. The blue-black mustache, long and thin and curled like a mandala to fame. The mischievous eyes literally twinkling, and the trademark silver cane inlaid with dark gemstones. It was Salvador Dali in the flesh. And the flesh was haggard and old, caked in futile layers of makeup, which mixed with the deep lines there, gave his face the look of a puppet like Mr. Bluster, the mayor of the town of Dutyville on the Howdy Doody show. But his movements were still quite spry as he led the woman toward the curb, toward the taxi, toward me. I had the door open by this time, but I was fairly mesmerized. It was easy to see why my eyes were drawn from the woman to him. He had a magnetic presence, and it went far beyond the oddity of his mustache, though up close that thing was pretty fucking wild. The two of them were perfect examples of those variations in presence which I've written about before. It was the difference between a chimpanzee and a cheetah. She was a monkey who had to leap around for attention. He was the cat, just moving smoothly, knowing it was going to come at him. And the cat was now stepping off the curb, the chimp at his side. I didn't have any idea what he wanted. I aroused a quick fantasy of him embracing me and laying a kiss on both cheeks and exclaiming, "Brother Ortiz, I know your work well and envy it even more. The first half of this century was mine, but clearly the second half has passed into your hands. Here, take the woman. She is yours forever." That's not exactly how it went down, however. Instead, they acted as if they were on some esplanade in Venice, and I was a peasant holding steady the plank to the gondola for them. He lifted up his cane to my knees, and as I'm still holding the door, he used it to softly brush me back. The woman entered the cab, giving me a look that said something along the lines of, "God, what is that?" I thought I had the valet scrape it from my boots this morning. Dali himself was gushing, smiling at me and swinging back his cane, entering the cab as if all were as it should be. I was awestruck. I was for some reason seeing myself at 15 years old, looking at his painting, The Crucifixion in the Met, for the first time. With my mouth hanging open, the painter slammed shut the door of the cab, leaving me sprawling on the hood of a parked car beside it. I raced back over to the cab where, to my amazement, Dali was opening the window and looking up to me. "Bonjour," he spoke, effusive and loud. "Bonjour," and the taxi sprang off like a horse that I had slapped on the rump. And I hadn't said a word. I might as well have had my dick in my hand on 57th Street in the middle of Midtown, cursed, naked, and supine. Imagine, popped by a fucking surrealist. It entered my mind to yell something hideous at the cab, which was stuck in traffic only 3 car lengths away. Something like, "You weirdo frog creep, hey, hype be thy savior, man. You wouldn't be diddly shit if it wasn't for that mustache. Man, those ants get tiresome after a while. How'd you like it if I snipped half of that thing off? I'm nobody's fool. I got scissors here and I know how to use them." But I couldn't do that, not to Salvador Dali, not to the man who embraced me in such a hastily conjured fantasy, passing on the torch of art, as it were. I just raised up my hand with half-parted lips and waved. "Bonjour, Monsieur Dali," I muttered. "Bonjour et adieu." I don't think I can remember the lyrics of that. Well, actually, maybe I could. No, I don't think I could. I don't think I could, man. I don't think I could. It's when the door to the river. That door is like 26 miles. It's... no, wait a minute. That's not even the first fucking line. What are you going, "yeah" for? it's when Billy's whores are working. They're working with the skeleton crew. Now I can't remember. It's when the sky over Jersey. That sky starts to change from blue. It's when... oh, man, forget it. Let me see. I'm gonna read a few new pieces here. This one. These are actually not even typed up yet, and the other ones are in this note written in my notebook. Well, the same as not being typed up. But these one's in a fancy notebook instead of being on this shit piece of yellow paper like this type of paper that Richard Nixon wrote on. This is called The Elimination of Nostalgia. The memories, the unwilling dreams, the lucid expectations attached to these walls, these things have expanded beyond the capacity of this room I've lived in so long, until it is destroyed totally from their pressure and caprice, but slowly in bits and gradations of a curious light, the color of the wings of neutral angels, those ones who they say in a ring brought down the grail from heaven. First your ears ring as you sleep, as if you were a kenneled dog descending in the cargo hold of a jet. Yet suddenly an epiphany arises unexpectedly with within the flushed radiance of your dream. As you wake, the tapestries on two walls begin to unravel. As the thin, worn, ancient threads drop in curls like smoke to the floor, the figures in armor on white horses scream, bewildered and fading. In corners, perplexed memories, long lost, clash against each other in arcs of blue light. Ashes fall and the silent scent of ice fills you, fills you, fills you, fills the room, fills the morning with a flammable nostalgia until it all just explodes with a sound like someone screaming, ba-ba-ba baby, 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 ba-ba-ba baby. And after that, a long, long hiss of something like steam, the last vapors of my dreams, and it sounds like James Brown singing, please, please, please. I'll read this piece. I actually wrote this on the train when I should have been getting something else done. I took a train here, actually, man. I didn't even sleep on it. 18 fucking hours, yeah, Amtrak. Yeah, I figured I'd get some work done. I figured it would be an adventure, you know. But it sucked a big one. Out the Chicago train window. These are just notes I made throughout the thing. Out the Chicago train window, in the tunnel, a light sped by. I thought it was a paper cup flying eye level straight down the aisle. Then we moved out into the last of the crepuscular light, that 4 p.m. late light with its anemic shadows. I dropped my cigarette lighter and filtered my hands, finding it in some recessed crud 30 years in the making, on a spring beneath the seat as we creep through the panels of upstate New York. Outside some town, train passes a 1930s beige hotel, only 6 flights, but oddly, more antennae, transmitters, and microwave dishes on the roof than the Russian embassy. And I should know, I lived 5 years down the street from the Russian embassy in New York City. Their microwave jamming equipment screwed up my TV reception, forcing me to get cable, forcing me to become addicted to TV, nailed for months to the headboard of my bed, transfixed, the sound mute, that whispering silky glow moving like a shadow wave across my face. I had the look of a condemned man and the convictions of one as well. In that sense, I could genuinely blame this period of digression directly on the Soviets, making it the only valid communist conspiracy I know of, being myself involved. Another time, when a motorcade sped up on the street and ran a red light, I was almost run over by the foreign minister of Russia, Mr. Gromyko's limousine. Dig that. Lord, grant me chastity and countenance, but not yet. So said St. Augustine. A forest now of bare widow trees, dark birches perhaps, in upstate, then back to a cliche of toxic outposts and used car lots. But here, beside a bone-shaped pond, a patriarch among elms. Jimmy Schuyler and Gary Snyder both told me to learn the names of every tree I could, and flower and constellations. I'm working on that. Then back to the woods, speeding by, the trees too quick to identify, but thick even leafless, they're thick, too thick for the worn-out sun to break through. So Erie, Pennsylvania can still merit the odd pastoral intrigue, this far from Paterson and its waterfalls and the doctor's den in the attic of his 3-story house. On the platform just outside of my window at the Cleveland stop, some student is on one knee focusing his Nikon on a sign reading "No access" for a ridiculously long amount of time, wanting to take an Audi photograph, I imagine, something in the vein of minimal photography. For some reason, this pisses me off horribly, the time he's taking. And out of sheer malignant caprice, just as he seems ready to shoot, I bang the window glass with a quarter and hack his concentration into discernible sections. He turns around and looks at me and reaches over as if to pick up the pieces of his concentration. I made a hand motion for him to hurry, that the only thing he should aim for is chance, not perfection. That perfection is the moment when chance, without intention or aim, enters the heart's womanly mind like a wandering etheric breeze. I feel bad entering South Bend about my behavior in Cleveland. The look on the poor kid's face, his Nikon hanging from his hand like a rejection slip from the Ivy League school of his choice. I could have felt better if he called me an asshole or flipped me off, and that just succeeded in pissing me off again. The fact that he had every right to get angry and just didn't. The whole thing brings me down. I notice that I have mentioned the brand Nikon twice thus far in this poem. I wish manufacturers treated poets as they do rock musicians. Maybe then they'd send me a free camera. It's true. Once I mentioned Bombay Gin in a song on a record album I made, and within 3 weeks of the LP's release, 3 cases of Bombay Gin arrived for me at the record company in New York. Strange. I never drink, least of all gin, which my ex-wife's alcoholic stepmother once told me poisons your brain cells faster than any other liquor. When I was 13, I drank Old Mr. Boston's lemon-flavored distilled gin with my friends, $1.16 per half pint. It didn't taste like lemon, and it made me walk on my knees so the puke wouldn't splatter so hard when it hit the pavement and thus muss up my new Puerto Rican shoes. The only reason I used the name Bombay Gin was to complete a rhyme scheme with the phrase, some gay sin. Also, I like the sound of the word Bombay. It's like bungalow. And I like the grim portrait of Queen Victoria on the label. Rod Stewart, someone at the record company said, drinks Bombay Gin. But I gave it to my guitar player instead, saving only 1 bottle, I suppose in case Rod stops by without calling first. But mentioning products can cause trouble in music as well. Once I did this program for MTV called The Roots of Rock and Roll. The show was centered around Lou Reed. He and his band did a live show at the Capitol Theater in New Jersey. Then, with everything being filmed for the TV show later, some late 50s New York girl groups that had influenced Lou did some songs. Then Run DMC, who were fairly new then and who the audience, to say the least, was ill appreciative of. Then the Ramones, boy, they hated them. They kept yelling to Lou, "Hey, Lou, do I want to be black?" It was a bitch. Then the Ramones, and then me. It was great to play with Lou's band, backing me up on 2 songs. But at the sound check, Earlier, this frantic woman with a clipboard, an assistant producer, came running over in dreary yet dreadful haste. She informed me that one of the regular sponsors of the show, Bristol Myers, are in fact the producers of Drano, and that they know I mentioned Drano in one of the lines of a song I recorded, People Who Died. They said if I didn't drop the reference to the drain opener, they would be forced to omit the entire song from the show. You mean pull the plug, I said, making a play on words, which the assistant producer didn't get. Since we had only rehearsed 2 songs and People Who Died was one of them, I relented. Bobby just OD'd on the night that he was wed instead of OD'ing on Drano on the night that he was wed. I actually put big cue cards on the monitors to remind me not to use that word. They said, no Drano. I wish the photographer from Cleveland was there for that. Now there was a minimal photograph. No Drano. I didn't mention it, and it actually sounded good. I just paused, and the bass player and drummer doodled a little 1-bar riff and a rim snare. It actually sounded good. I thought maybe next time I'll drop it again. But what I really wanted to know was who was the executive at Bristol Myers and Company or at Drano who had listened to my record close enough to notice that they should make this remark, that they should make this censorship. It would have really interested me. In fact, Lou was kind of pissed off that no one was censoring his song for the show. Holy shit, there it is, Comiskey Stadium, and the voice of this woman over the Amtrak train remarks, it's the oldest stadium in the United States, in the major leagues, that is. And we're in Chicago. Nostalgia and oak trees work to outsmart time and distance. Let's see. Winky Blinky. Yeah. I read that piece out, in the Winky and Blinky piece, out somewhere, and I became so embarrassed in the middle of it that I had to stop. Actually, I could read this lyric. It's a new song that I wrote for some other band. Though I'm actually might do a record myself now. It's a possibility. It's called Teeth and Doubt. I got a bunch of different pages here. I don't know how it will go. I just finished. I'm a balloon. I am expanding. I'm going to fly away. Despite my free will, it's hard to say no when you don't have to pay. Everyone drinks from the goldfish bowl. They swim in the dolphin's bed. Under the bookshelf, I find my past self carving a future head. But up each street, beneath my feet, my shoes are chewed by the teeth and doubt. As if the whole world were whispering. It's like the whole wide world would whispering. It's like the cities were all whispering and you're left here to shout. Please save the lemurs, save women's garters, save every ghost that swings from trees. Make sure the jungle grows, no more girls in pantyhose, preserve the mysteries. Inside the ghetto, Billy's girlfriend stiletto. She wants things as they once were when she stuck to him and he stuck to her like chewing gum on a poodle's fur. But the stars are sweet, they keep the beat, and my shoes are chewed by teeth in doubt, as if the cities were whispering and you're left here to shout. I fly a Navy jet, to others down on the set, I'm just a crawling blip. Up at this altitude, I need some mouth to soothe the orders on my lips. It's all computerized, and the suits decide the nature of the game. But when I get my tone, I lodge the fiery bone. I don't even need to aim. Because the sky's so vast and the plane so fast, there's no need to place concern on who gets burned. It's like someone let out a shout. It's like the people were all moving out. It's like the others all were left in doubt, and you had to return. I don't know if did I read this piece, Terrorist Trousers, last time? Okay, this is a kind of new piece. Terrorist Trousers. The ceremony is over. The wedding party pull off their ski masks. The bride and her dreaming spouse stir. They hit the streets wearing their terrorist trousers. They got pockets big enough to hold water from the sabotaging of dams. Big enough for miles of plastic explosive shape like open hands. For 10,000 tiny bottles of liquor from a hijacked jet left behind in the air when they dropped to earth like kittens on angel dust thrown from penthouse windows. They got pockets small enough for the deadly black bacilli shaped like broken bits of rubber bands in tiny vials, small enough for plutonium shaped like a cough drop. Got pockets filled with options for destruction and disaster. They got gun stains on their skin, soft and alabaster. They got a map of your hometown. Jeanette is upset. She's got a doll in her vest. It's anatomically correct. In New York City, you better keep your mouth shut, because when the weather's warm and you grow a bit more blind, at any moment you could find a piece of leftover night stuck between your teeth. It feels like a moth's wings or a bruised strand of peach skin. It tastes like the wormwood water, bitter as Chernobyl wine. Jeanette takes a doll from her vest, smashes it with glove on fist. She picks out its miniature spine and runs it between her teeth to clean away that taste of night and its bright brutality. Runs the spine like a toothpick through rows of white and decay until she hits a large cavity blooming in the back rows of impacted wisdom, like a flower of agony and despair. And you see the pain set her off. You could see it arouse her as she joins her comrades in their terrorist trousers. Let's see here. Okay, this is from a kind of longish poem. Longish. It's kind of like a sonnet or a sestina, or it's a technical term, a longish poem. No, actually, I'll just Yeah, all right, I'll read a section of this. On a Saturday, Stella, the fortune teller, takes you on a whirlwind tour of the night spot she favors, a dive where a woman in a leopard skin snatches coins from the air with a lariat, and a huge cavern 4 stories underground where midgets and loincloths wrestle in a mock lagoon, and a private club on a barge moored off Redondo Beach where girls wearing nothing but skull caps and ribbons dance with rubber cobras under a pink waterfall. In the wee hours, you visit Stella's dealer to score some hashish, opiated stuff from Morocco. The brick from which he cuts you 6 grams is lettered in yellow with Arabic characters. Stella fills her hookah with creme de mint, and you drive up the hills overlooking the city, and with the radio turned on low, you pull hard on the clear tube and the green liquid bubbles while the smoke pours into your lungs, expands, and sets off a distant drumming in your ear. The far provinces of your brain light up, topaz and ruby, like the twinkling networks of Los Angeles stretching out as far as you can see. Not really a city, as you know the term, but a quilt of suburbs, from Catalina to San Bernardino. And Stella, truly clairvoyant, suddenly pipes into your thoughts, exhaling blue halos with a sigh. You see the problem before you. There's no center to this place, no Times Square, no Loop or Bourbon Street, and that's why everyone here is unscented too. These streets flow nowhere, these buildings are empty. Think of it as a ghost town. So you've come full circle, or as Stella would say, full figure 8, the sign for infinity. And now she's coughing up the theory of those Romanian opera singers posing as mutes who were so sure Jefferson's ghost is holed up in the city of angels, Thomas Jefferson's ghost, that is. Greater LA is 5,000 square miles, she continues, and if you transplanted it to the moon for a few days, facing the sun, of course, no one here would notice. Meanwhile, you're busy calculating. When Jefferson was president, California was a Spanish colony administered from Mexico. Not until 24 years after his death in 1850 did it join the Union, the 31st state, during the Polk administration. You learn all of this the next morning in one of the remoter branches of the public library, a little adobe building with a terracotta roof tucked into a triangle of palm trees on a dead-end street called Thomas Paine Lane. Stella insists you're not safe in crowded places, has brought you by a circuitous route, past dusty orange groves and a scrap metal yard and a shanty town of cardboard lean-tos and tattered tents, and then through a maze of sleepy residential streets with solid boxy houses and big cars parked under black trees. Outside the library, beside a weathered cannon and a dozen cannonballs soldiered into a pyramid, the flag is flying at half-mast on a 200-foot pole. Someone has died, but even the librarian can't say who it is. You glance at the calendar, and by some coincidence, it's July 4th, the day Thomas Jefferson died. But that can't be. No public building would be open on July 4th. The librarian shrugs again and disappears into the stacks. Before you leave the reference books a few minutes later and return to Stella chain-smoking in the limo with the air conditioner purring, you also discover that Jefferson was the first president seriously interested in the western U.S., that he, in fact, dreamt up the Lewis and Clark expedition and negotiated the Louisiana Purchase. In the same history of California, many chapters later, your eye catches on an obscure footnote, chop suey, from the Cantonese shop su, which means odds and ends. Invented San Francisco circa 1900 by the Chinese laborers who built the railroads at 2 cents an hour. The first of our many fast foods, that mulligan stew of the Golden West, concocted half a century before the burger and fries and half a century after statehood. chronologically at least, chop suey lies in the center of something big, something I just can't put my finger on. Okay, this is called Guitar Voodoo. I awakened in a pool of mild chemical reaction. I stood up then in the darkness and felt what it was drain slowly from my ankles and fingertips like thousands of lesser hands weaving small flags beneath my skin. The darkness of that room hummed like a small machine. There was a thin red glow shining from the walls. Turned and noticed some strips of fluorescent light outline a doorway. Felt along there for a switch. There was a button instead, shaped like a V. I saw I was in a photographer's darkroom. The liquid I had woken in now almost totally dissolved across my skin. Must have been some agent used in the developing process. I searched over myself to check for damaging effects. There were no burns apparently, though my veins glowed a metallic silver. I ran my forearms under some warm water, but it only seemed to sharpen that effect. I figure I'd come back to that later. Health had never been a real big concern. I began to take a look around. I found a drawer in a metal cabinet with my lover's name on it. I forced the lock and withdrew the contents, a box of color slides she had once taken of her ex-husband. There were a dozen of them, each with the same pose of him leaning naked and obscene against the trunk of a lavender Bentley. They obsessed me immediately. I emptied them into my jacket pocket and returned the box to the drawer, leaving it open. Pushed another V-shaped button and took an 8-seat jet back to the city. I never liked that man. I once read in my lover's diary the methods he used in bed to please her. What I read haunted me many months. It reached such a clarity beneath my eyes when I lay beside her in the darkness that for 16 weeks I could not bring myself to touch her. It forced her to return to him each Sunday morning, and when I discovered this, I led her out one evening to the beryllium flats, and with a shovel, I dug a place for her to rest. When the time came that I wanted her back, I realized she had many months before forgotten how to breathe. I know guitar voodoo. I learned it from a woman with white hair in the hills above Kingston who all day slit open the crowns of oranges and raised them above her head for the sun to drink. At night, one day each month, she gathered the dry, pale skins in mounds and left them for the full moon to push back beneath the earth. This cycle gave her great powers. And because I one day taught her the proper way to sharpen the blade on her knife, she gave some power to me. She opened the case of my guitar and placed 6 fingertips to the pickups beneath the string. She made a tea from the dried orange leaves on her fire and taught me the way of guitar voodoo. When I got to my apartment with the photographs, I placed them in a plain glass bowl. I lifted from my dresser the porcelain sphere the white-haired mistress had given me 1 year past. This was the time to put it into use, I thought. The scent from the thick golden substance inside was sweet and true like a child breathing. This was a byproduct of what the sun itself had one day left behind for me. With my adrenaline rising, a slow heat turned like a fist beneath my heart. My hands tightened for the power. I poured the substance into the bowl, over the squares of processed celluloid containing his obscene naked image. When the last drop rolled out, I put down the sphere, and though it served no purpose to the ceremony, I danced 1 hour before I slept. By the time I woke next morning, the magic was already complete. I shaved to make myself pretty. I went to the living room sofa. I took the slides from the bowl and laid them in 2 rows of 6 across a glass tabletop. I raised the bowl to my lips and drank what was left over. Opened the closet door and removed my guitar from its case. Turned the power on with the switch on the amp and hooked the jacks. I shut my eyes as the potion began to take me over. There were small globes, the color of burst capillaries, framed by an uncertain gravity before a white expanse. Then, slowly, an image began to focus. I could see clearly as the sun that man who was my lover's husband lying in his bed in his home in Northern California. He had just woken. Some shadows of morning light hung from the brass bedposts. He was sitting up now beneath a fancy hippie quilt with his eyes fully opened. I took one of the Voodoo slides, which turned rigid by the potion overnight, and fingering on the neck of the guitar an A chord, ran his naked image, like a guitar pick, across the strings. I saw the reaction as if standing behind a mirror on his bedroom wall. His body shuddered violently on the bed. He seemed to be pulled a few inches off the mattress until the sound finally quit reverberating inside the amp. The room was left with a hollow ringing within silence, like air inside a nitrous oxide dream. He gripped his convulsing and stopped it. His eyes searched the room for answers. He checked some objects on top of the bookshelves, praying with moving lips that they had been knocked over to sustain his hope that there was an earthquake taking place, that there was some natural explanation for all of this. But nothing was moved. I was delirious with pleasure. I upped the volume of the amp to 8 and ran the voodooed image across the strings windmill style like Pete Townsend. He was thrown back down across the floorboards as if by the force of a giant reptile's tail across his neck. I couldn't figure out if the voodoo force worked from outside his body or within. More likely both, I imagined. He quivered on his back and implored the ceiling to stop. On his bare chest, 6 lines of blood, thin as guitar strings, opened and pulsed. I looked down. I thought about stopping, but I couldn't. I noticed the red draining down my fingers' crevices now. The magic, it seemed, was transporting his blood to me 3,000 miles away in New York City. I thought a moment to stop, but it was out of my control. I slammed into another G chord. I saw a woman run into his room and gape in astonishment. When I saw her hands clap tight over her ears, I realized that he was screaming out the guitar chords from deep inside his lungs with the same volume produced by my guitar and amp. His larynx about to shatter like a crystal goblet. More chords. He slammed against 4 walls. It was weakening. My power was growing stronger. His fingers clutched his throat for the pain each uncontrolled shriek was causing. On-off switch, for God's sake. Why didn't you tell me about that? I was diddling this thing like it was, The veins along his forearm were throbbing and choking each other like killer vines. The woman bolted from the room, signing herself at the cross. I realized it was beginning to do him in. The building tension of the strings in E forced the lines of blood across his chest to spurt like steam from split valves. And it was bringing sound from within him which human tissue was incapable of bearing. I slapped my hand across the pickups to snuff the sound. I wiped the sweat and blood from the glass tabletop and leaned over to switch off the power in the amp. There was the last image of his body dropping limp and unconscious to the floorboard, stunned of his room. I opened my eyes, I did my belt buckle, and I slept. This is called Just Visiting. Can I see if I'm sit over? This is about a guy, he tries to take somebody captive in a bungled bank robbery attempt, and he gets a hostage, but he really doesn't know what to do from there. It's in the first person, but it's not exactly autobiographical or anything. Please make no inferences. When the shooting broke, I decided to vault, this is called Just Visiting. When the shooting broke, I decided to vault the teller's window and face the fire from the other side. They saw my forearm tightening across the throat of the cashier, Ms. Lattimore, and as my browning was raised to her temple's pulse, they took it back. It all fell dead. With the silence, I felt the distance between my trigger and the man. I heard the reverberation of the last stray bullet's muffled ring. It moved out through my brain in circles of jagged light expanding like still water broken by a stone. Some smart young lieutenant arrived to take things over. He leaned his eyes a moment through the doors, then went around back to throw the switch. The light rolled out of thin vapor tubes above me from right to left. The darkness absorbed more silence. I could hear their details being assigned. The tone of the headman's voice was clear. They were hot to blow me away. I didn't expect my hostage would go down as a deal. I knew she signed that paper when she took the job, but I just wanted some last contact. I would have rather some sweet, clever music. I slit the strap to her bra, reached under. I felt my palm rinse her breast. It could have been a radio. I moved my lips closer so only she could hear me. It should have been a radio. Whispering, I told her, I said, you see, all my life, the women I've been with, and that's more than you can imagine, really. I always bypassed their breasts. I went down, you know. I went to the source. I honestly don't think you're going to die, so don't be afraid. Listen to me. I wanted the thunder on my fingers, on my lips. I mean, what are a woman's breasts? It's just so much adornment. They lie like some chalice on an altar waiting for adoration. Like the writing on the scroll, the handles on the urn, the gold that lines the vessel. I wanted that mystery inside, the thunder and the darkest light. I mean, I can feel the sharpness of your nipples. It is flawless here, no doubt about that. Just let me move it over here. Oh, it came out. It's so red. You must be younger than you appear. I know about that kind of thing, really. Once I told this girl she had breasts like bleeding lemons. She thought that was a beautiful thing to say. But what are they? It's just architecture. Where is the wetness, and why are they so white, so terribly white? Whiteness frightens me horribly. When I was 14 years old, I went to my friend's house at the beach in Long Island. The sun there on the sand, I remember. It was terrible. Too much whiteness. I couldn't stand it. I stayed in my friend's room for days and listened to music, the Dave Clark Five. His mother and his fat sister thought me quite insane. I wanted to teach myself to play the drums. The sister was 36 years old and so fat the mother had to tie the laces on her shoes. I hated her and she hated me, but I was just visiting, so it wasn't very fair. One day I bolted out of the bathroom while she was listening, leaning up to the door, and I jammed a pencil into her jaw. She ran away crying about lead poisoning, but you know, you really can't get lead poisoning that way. That's a wives' tale. I know about that kind of thing, really. At night, when those shadows cancel that blinding whiteness, I go down to the beach and run, because it is important to keep the body well. That's in case they ever come again. You, I'm sure, don't concern yourself much worrying about them, do you? You know, your breasts are like that beach, so white and dry, yet so near to the source, the water, and the motion of the waves. What could ever be more pure? Please allow me to just feel down there. I won't try to sneak anything up the wrong hole. I know that can hurt if you're not used to it. They did it to me. I let them think I didn't really care, but I found a closet down at the end of the tier, at the end of the cell block, and I hid in it and learned things and made marks on my forearm with a fork I snuck from the cafeteria. You could see it here, the scars. That's not just an X, not any X. It's actually an image of the cross St. Peter died on. His cross wasn't like Christ. That was shaped like a T. This was shaped like an X. They nailed him to it inverted. You know, that means upside down. He's my patron saint, so I know about those things. And there it is, in wet. Is that from fear? Wetness is not whiteness, you know, but it's so dark. Whiteness is the color of death, you know, not black. Wetness is life, the breeder and shaper of life. In the beginning, the sun was black, so all life was absorbed before it had any chance to return. And all our dreams then were just empty. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Night.